So, hello everyone. I will hand you over to Fiona to kick us off.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Fiona Shaw. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the editor of Ethos. So it's good to see you all. Thank you for coming along. This is our second event with Baltic Creative. Some of you I know came along to the first one, but this evening we're going to be talking about in our neighbourhoods and better business. So looking at people, place and planet and asking, generally speaking, do businesses have a responsibility to do good? You can imagine what our answer is to that. So this evening we're joined, as I say, by our partners at Baltic Creative, but we've got Pentameter here too, we've got Patagonia, and we've got Cornell, who's at Sembo Scotland, who is going to be the first person to chat to us this evening. Cornell is he's a climate scientist, he's a policy developer, he's a consultant. He works with minority communities all over the place, with government and NGO groups on representation and diversity. So I will pass you in his direction.
Okay, what does he do for a day job?
Yeah, that's just on Thursday evenings.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm going to just do the old screen share. Hold, please. There we go. It's all fine. So, as Fiona said, my name's Cornell Hengsenfu. I work for Sembo Scotland, which is the Council of Ethnic Minority Volunteering Organisation, and I also coordinate the Ethnic Minority Environmental Network. But as Fiona said, I've had a lot of roles in my life. I've been a climate scientist, environmental consultant, a science communicator. So I've worked in terms of government, private sector, third sector, all different areas. So it kind of gives me a bit of a broad view of what it really means to embed people and planet together and what really builds a good business. So a lot of us and a lot of the businesses here I know are working B Corp or have some sort of stake in working towards carbon neutrality and working towards fighting the environmental crises in their own way. And so I think just to start off with, I want to set the scene a little bit in terms of climate and how that's affecting us to this day and what this current situation is. So the current environmental crisis, this is just going to bum people out and then I'm going to bring people back up just as a warning, because that's what I do. So there's obviously a lot of environmental crises, plenty, and we are all doing our own part because we believe that there needs to be some sort of change and we all need to do our own little bit. And so at the moment, the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is pushing 3.2 degrees. It's beyond the threshold that scientists agree is a safe limit before things start creating havoc. As you see in the graphic, there's at 2 degrees, you start to see tropic coral reefs just disappear completely. So the latest advice from the Climate Change Advisory Group is basically like the scientific and public experts who would come together for coronavirus. The same thing has happened. They come together for the climate change, a lot of them from the UN's IPCC, and they've recommended that we need to reduce, remove, and repair the climate and our environments. And so their target is 2035 rather than 2050 because of the way that things have been going. We were supposed to bend carbon emissions at 2020, but we haven't done that. And all predictions have said, once we bend, we can start adding in other things. And so our general effect will be building up to something that's a little easier to deal with, but that hasn't happened. So what does that really mean for businesses that are doing B Corp sort of things and that are working towards carbon neutrality, which is already really difficult? It just kind of means we need to do more, but how do we start doing more? Working towards carbon neutrality is perfect. That means you're making sure that your business and what you do with your customers, your clients, your communities is not affecting the planet in one way. But that doesn't mean you're helping it exactly. So step one, of course, is to make sure you're not affecting the planet in a negative way. But what's step two? It's really bringing up those around you, supporting the planet in any way you can. And so I'm going to talk a little bit on that. Whoop. So I want to talk about the Climate Challenge Fund, and that's something that I've worked on previously. So the Climate Challenge Fund is something that the Scottish government disseminated to communities all around Scotland. And the reason why this is relevant is because of things like 1% of the planet, where companies take away 1% of turnover and then they give that towards projects for communities. And that could be anything, whether that be certain carbon reductions like growing projects, travel projects, whether that be to rewilding stuff. And that's what I would kind of mean by step two, where you're kind of giving back something. You're not just reducing what you do and making sure that you're neutral. It's kind of giving back, because we need to start doing that repair stage. And that's what really is necessary for businesses and the community to do together. So the Climate Challenge Fund itself was about 1,000+ projects, civil society coming together, and they're all creating their own growing projects, their own travel projects, energy saving projects, waste recycling, so many different things. And the other important thing that we came out of this was that 150 minority ethnic projects were supported through the fund. And a lot of people would say that, you don't see people from minority ethnic backgrounds engaging much in climate change. You'd be in a room, it probably won't be very diverse in there. And that's not to say that they're not keen. The evidence is shown here. Those projects by those minority ethnic people were brought up by someone who was keen to do that stuff. They started the project, and then that kind of snowballed into their own plans, their own projects, and the next one, they affect the next people. And that's kind of what is best to do with businesses, is connect to your customers, connect to your clients, connect to your communities, because that's where you can do the best. You can't necessarily change the world as one business, as one person. I learned that the hard way as a kid, going into university and doing climate science, and being like, yes, I want to change the world. Of course, that didn't happen. And I've gone through all these different roles. And what I've really learned is you can't change the world, but what you can change is your community. And changing your community actually affects the whole wide things. If we all change our own little parts of our community, our own little parts of the world that we affect, eventually that's just going to cascade to a whole change of things. And that includes the circular economy as well. That whole idea where you make sure that, well, I'm not going to go into explaining the circular economy because that's a big thing, but it's just doing your part. And some of the projects that came out of this, like Green at Kirkcaldy, it started as a reuse and repair project where they would publish guides for the community and how to do that, provide energy advice. And originally this was a project that was just in Kirkcaldy, and it is now Fife-wide in Scotland. That's several towns around Scotland, and it's become its own independent fund. These people were given their own agency from a fund external to them, and they just rolled with it, and it expanded greatly from there. The Shetland Growing Project itself, Shetland being the isolated place it is, not too many people in there, but they got funding for 12 polycrubs, these like growing kind of domes that are very specific to that environment. And that supported 50 growers feeding the community all around. And it eventually turned into a social enterprise. And now they sell fruit and veg and other foods all across Scotland and as far as the Falkland Islands. Another project, which is the Forth Valley Communities for Conservation. Their whole idea was to foster increased awareness and behaviour across minority ethnic communities across the central belt of Scotland. And they really involved a lot of underrepresented groups in the community. They had project coordinators that would work with the Polish and Eastern European communities, a project coordinator with the Chinese and East Asian communities, another one with the African Caribbean communities, another one with the South Asian communities. So they really gave people in those communities a sense of agency. And for those people, it's become a lifestyle. They really increased the employability, the upskilling. They created this community cohesion and inclusion on top of reducing carbon themselves. These communities now have ownership of change. And the reason I bang on about this is because things like 1% of the planet really do work. And you don't necessarily need to do that. Like, that's a tried and tested project, but that doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for everyone. So my takeaway from all this is, don't feel overwhelmed about what's going around in the world. Feel inspired by what's going on around you. You know, there are programs like B Corping and 1%. That is a good step, definitely. I'm not saying that it's not, but you really determine your own effect on the planet, and you determine how what you do affects your customers, your clients, and the communities. Don't sell yourself short for the amount of influence you can have. I mean, your business itself is a community. Think about it. As wanky as that sounds, it is. You've got a couple of people together, they are getting paid, but there is potential there. So I will leave you with the thought that you really decide how much is enough for your organization. You can take the one step to make sure you're at a neutral point, or you can take the second step to make sure you're giving back and you're positively influencing those around you and those you work with and those you rely on. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cornell. That was really great. For those that have just joined or joined a bit late, welcome. What we're going to do now is I brought everyone on screen. We're going to have a little conversation with everyone. I'll ask another couple of attendees to introduce themselves, and then we'll have a conversation around kind of good business for about 30 minutes. And then, so if you've got any questions for anyone, pop them in the chat and we'll bring those into the conversation. And then for the last 45 minutes, we're going to hand over to James and Annalise from Pentameter, who will take us through a session, a good business 101. But I will just ask James and Annalise first, just to say hello and introduce yourselves, and then over to you, Harry, and then we'll have a chat. James, Annalise.
Who goes first?
Who wants,
Yeah.
who goes first? We'll both go. Can the other one go first? So yeah, I'm kind of Annalise, co-founder and creative director of Pentameter, and we're a transformation design company, really just looking to help transform kind of businesses kind of through systemic change so that they can actually face these social and environmental challenges that we're facing really at the moment. And this is my co-founder, James.
So yeah, I mean, we're building now. We've got another partner who isn't with us, Olivia Sprinkles, who's an expert in impact and sustainability strategy. So our three pillars are really purpose, culture, and impact. We think those are the sort of pieces that we need to work on to help organizations change and fast. Annalise will tell you a bit more about that in a bit, but my background is from digital transformation. Started off in the Bay Area of San Francisco when nobody even knew what the internet was, and I really followed it as a career, seeing that it was really going to positively change the world. And it did, and then it didn't. Those sort of positive vibes around the digital industry certainly are not still with us. But really a few years ago, I decided to, having followed that through as a consultant, working with major brands, I decided doing this job and bringing those tools to this task, I saw was the first thing that really inspired me as a passion since, for 20 odd years. So I jumped career, and that after over a short time, Pentameter was born when I met Annalise with the same vision. So we've been going 3 years, and that's us. 4 years, sorry.
And Harry, over to you.
Cheers, Andrew. I just want to start by saying thank you to Ethos and the Baltic for hosting this event tonight and for the invitation to come along. It's great to be here with everyone. my name's Harry. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I work for Patagonia, and I handle our environmental and marketing initiatives for the UK. And to be honest, I think I've got the best job in Patagonia, in that I get the opportunity to engage with our environmental and sporting communities on the matters that they are passionate about, and ultimately support, guide, amplify, and bring value from a brand perspective, from a company perspective, to their causes, and ultimately drive solutions to the environmental crisis in a way that is equitable and inclusive.
Yeah, yeah, you won't get many people arguing that that isn't a very, very great job, Harry.
Very lucky.
Thank you for that. Well, I suppose I suppose one of the kind of first question, and which is really kind of open to everyone, you know, I think kind of historically, you know, particularly at the situation we're in now with both the climate crisis and as we kind of come out of the pandemic, you know, you know, I think historically there was kind of private businesses and social enterprises, you know, that was how kind of people saw the split. But, you know, I think, well, like being a good business is good for business, you know, like when we talk about kind of sustainability and B Corp. And I wonder if I'll leave that open for the group, anyone that wants to kind of comment on that. Anyone?
I'm happy to lead off on that one, Andrew. And to be honest, I think I'm cautious about placing too much emphasis on the commercial benefit of brand activism.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, as much as we talk about good, it's making sure that the actions we take as businesses have sufficient substance to back them up. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we live in a time of such self-reflection and demand for change that there is a necessity to be authentic, to be transparent and be accountable.
Yeah.
And whilst there is this drive and people want to be able to work for businesses that have these values, and communities want to engage with businesses who advocate for this, and people want to buy products from businesses that advocate this, you still need to take consideration of your responsibilities at every step of the way and actually ensure that the growth that you have is aligned with the responsibilities that you're addressing. And that can be a scary prospect. And it's taking consideration, as Cornell said, of not necessarily of the good you're doing, because good is a word that we use to make us feel better about the harm that we cause. And ultimately, instead phrasing that as responsibility and addressing the responsibility at every step of the way. And then from there, you can start to talk about the good you do beyond it. But ultimately, I think business isn't held to the same standard of which we hold ourselves as individuals accountable. And first, we need to address that before we can start to say that we're doing good and start to maybe not profiteer on that, but use it as a tool to push our brand, service, or whatever we may be.
No, I definitely kind of agree with that, because because behind that responsibility, because I think maybe what drives kind of people to be willing to take that responsibility is actually the fundamental component of for business to find a higher purpose beyond itself, kind of obviously beyond making money, and making sure that that really is embedded in the DNA of everything you do. And kind of it's easy to kind of say that kind of thing, but for that to be truly effective, what we're finding is that you need to involve the whole community. That means all your stakeholders in that process, because when you give people that opportunity to have a voice and be part of that journey, that's when you build real meaningful work for people. And I mean, like, kind of something that we see all too often is actually a top-down approach to purpose, where you have leadership coming up with the purpose and telling Dave on the factory floor that he now has to believe X, Y, and Z, he has to behave like this. And that's really just not how purpose works. Like, purpose is fundamentally intrinsic. I mean, it comes out of people. It's not something you can superimpose on other people. So like, obviously when you're a company that already exists, that in that kind of sphere that functions like that, you're going to attract people because of that purpose. But if you're still in that early stage where you're trying to transition towards being one of these 21st century 2021 businesses, it's really important that you kind of bring people into that process to get buy-in, because these companies, they take this kind of almost traditional kind of old business paradigm approach to and try and apply that to a new business concept, and then they get confused why they're not kind of getting buy-in and why kind of people aren't kind of taking it on board, and it's because they're mixing up the process really.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that's really valid, is that conversation around culture as well, and actually ensuring that you're all pulling in the same direction in what you do on a day-to-day. And again, from a Patagonia perspective, we had a change in our mission statement about 2 years ago, and that was to reflect the climate crisis ultimately. And that was going from a very long 3-sentence mission statement that talked about our responsibilities simply just to, we're in business to save our home planet. And you talk about this kind of top-down leadership not working. That was dropped on us almost overnight by Yvonne, who again founded the company back in '73 and is still at the helm and leading the vision. But there was no instruction with that. There was no guidance. There was no operating procedure. It was very much, you're smart individuals. You have the tools and resources at your own disposal. Figure it out. And that is certainly the best way to build community culture and to get people invested at the same time. And actually, by demonstrating that, you are going to bring in the talent, but you're also going to bring in a wider range of individuals from across society who can bring skills that otherwise, if you stick to a polarized procedure, you're ultimately not going to attract them and remain homogenous.
I mean, in terms of, I mean, what, from all of your perspective, what are the biggest barriers? Do you think it is on people kind of getting started? So obviously we've got a lot of business owners watching this, and what do you see are the kind of common barriers? Is it an issue of embedding it within an organization, or is for those that are looking to start on a journey, or already on it but would like to kind of to do more, what do you see as the kind of common barriers for organizations?
Well, for organizations, the larger you get, everybody knows that the harder it gets to change. And just addressing Harry's point about it being a top-down thing, well, if you do need, there is a place for leadership, obviously. It's not even though organizational democracy is a really important thing and a value that is spreading, and we need to get our heads around, with some people I know on the call, organizing their structures around a method called holocracy, which is sort of a pioneering, open, completely democratic methodology for organizing your staff. I think Yvonne is smart enough to know to be able to voice the spirit of the organization. So I don't think it's necessarily top down. He, knowing his values, surely it's voicing everybody. It's the place of the voice of the community, and it's not top down. I think, like Annalise meant, where we've got our great idea. This is our company. Go and do it. He is voicing on behalf of everybody all that that you believe in. It just doesn't make sense knowing as I'm not as much as you, Harry, but I've read the books and listened to him often enough to know that's the case. So for us as change agents, as people that go in to help people not just change, but change at speed, we always say culture is the barrier. It is, but we have now moved from an era where people used to say corporates cannot change. It's just impossible, with help of some academics and help with things like even neuroscience and observing, using science of change and how individuals and human communities actually change, not how people think they change. There are some pretty powerful tools that we've got now, and I have to say most of it centers around dealing with the culture, and so the participation and involving people in change, and particularly, this is why I'm on Annalise's slide. It says, change at the speed of imagination, because everybody now knows that it's not just that we need to change, it's how fast we can change that's the issue, how deep we can change. And if we look at how individuals and groups tend to change, they don't change very well when they're frightened. And therefore, yes, we can go around, and we know we've got wonderful work with Extinction Rebellion, fantastic work from people like Greta, we're going to die sort of thing, or the planet's at risk, which is great. We need that message. But when it comes around to people changing, and communities of people changing, and places change, science shows that really you have to be in a place of not being freaked out and being confident and creative together to think and build a vision of a positive future together. And that's the way to get speed, to be able to dismantle, sort of start unthinking things, and together saying, what can we do from our point of confidence and our strength? So we have this sort of funny thing that just because it's so serious, we have to be a bit chilled out about what we do. We have to have fun and play involved in the process we use when we engage organizations. Otherwise, people, you know the traditional responses to fear. You go deer in the headlights, you freeze, you deny it, you go into avoidance. We can't cope with that, we just got to get on with day-to-day work. Or you basically forget, or you rebel. All of those things tend to be more prevalent in people who are scared. I mean, obviously, if the house is on fire, somebody has to say, get out. There is, you can only take it so far. But generally, when you're working with groups of people over the longer term to bring cultural change, we always recommend sort of get really positive about what is your strength and how you can use that to shift fast to a better future.
And I think to almost like subset of that building from a strength, I think Hilary Cotton kind of talks about this, she's an expert on social systems design, and I think she highlights this in her book Radical Help, that it's really important to build capabilities in people, and that means capability to work through challenges and to grow and to learn, and in order for them to have meaningful lives. So kind of when you're looking at, if you're either tapping into the strengths you've already got, or in that gap analysis, you're making sure that you're building the capabilities in people rather than just doing something for someone else, and therefore actually disempowering them to be able to deal with that situation again in the future and to be able to grow together as a community. So I think building capability as well is really important.
And I think feeding into that, ultimately, the conversation around community. So to go back to an earlier point, I don't think that we should be acting with a sense of panic, but I think we should be acting with urgency, but in a meaningful way. And I don't think we should ever undervalue the crisis we're in. And at the same time, I think businesses have a responsibility to actually stop and go outside their office door or speak to their cohabiting office space, whoever it may be, business, and actually say, what matters to you? What can we collaborate on? What matters to the people who live in the houses around our office block? What are the issues affecting you? And at the same time, have a responsibility to reach out to individuals like Cornell, who are doing work with communities that aren't just in our periphery, they're in our blind spots. And ultimately, there's only a limited number of groups that we as individuals on this call can connect with and have an impact with. And yes, we're not all going to make big changes that are going to fix the world overnight, and it's all about marginal gains. But we also need to take consideration of the communities who get left behind in the process as well. And again, it'd be great to hear kind of, Cornell, your perspective on this as to kind of the role those communities have in actually engaging with business.
Yeah, I think the first point that I want to make is that in my experience, where I've seen a lot of good is when you give people, as I was saying in my presentation, the agency, and that's giving the people the agency in your own businesses as well. Because sometimes when you give people space to think and a little bit of time to act, they've got some great ideas. Top down doesn't need to always happen. I mean, when you say this is the big plan, and as Harry was saying, this is what happened in Patagonia. You guys are smart. You will find some people, especially in these bigger organizations, you will just numbers wise, you will find some people who are quite keen, and they will have some great ideas. They're probably thinking in their own specific role. If it's just say, like Annalise was saying, like the one guy in the factory, he's probably either himself or someone who works with them has some ideas of how they can streamline the work itself and make it more efficient, save energy, something like that. And in terms of, Harry, what you were talking about, these communities and these people that you kind of miss out on, it's really the fact that it's kind of like an underused resource in a way. And these are also, a lot of the time when we do business, it's the people that we don't see as your customer in the same sense. So it kind of falls into the same area, is where you think you may be able to do good is not actually where the best place to be good. That's where you need to open up your mind, open up your vision, talk to more people around you. And that also includes talking to the people in your businesses, because they have their own lived experiences, they have their own connections, and maybe they have some great ideas in where you can make a lot of change as well, at least in your business internally as well as externally.
And I think that's really key, in that we need to consider that during this time, especially with what's happened over the last 12 months and the kind of internal reflection, is that everything is intersectional, and that ultimately what happens in your business affects more people than you can take consideration of. And if we're going to talk about this as a social and ecological crisis, we need to pull every lever that is available to us. And we're not going to do that without sufficient collaboration and buy-in from every stakeholder at every level.
And to that point, how you know, for a business owner that agrees with that, I mean, how would you recommend businesses go about the process of engagement with people, whether it's teams, whether it's you know, is there work that needs to go into preparing to provide the space for that, or is it simply a case of just pulling people together and having that conversation? How would you recommend people get started with that?
Can I talk, because I know at Baltic Creative there's quite a lot of digital agencies, isn't there? And I don't know if there's many on the call, but I want to talk to that if you can, because a lot of this is obviously about culture change, but I think part of it is about methodology as well. I think as I followed the track through digital, we developed this in the industry, this term called user-centered design, or later human-centered design, which then sort of bled out to what we now call user experience design and so on. It sort of evolved, but it was focused on trying to focus on helping people use systems effectively. I don't know if people remember sort of like 15, 20 years ago when you couldn't do anything on your computer at work without calling IT. You know, it used to be terrible. And therefore there was this feeling that digital, the new media design, was releasing people from the tyranny of the IT department of the 90s, and was seen as sort of like I mean, just Steve Jobs used to say, digital is a new media, is the internet is a tool that will amplify human imagination and agency. You know, it was all positive. And fast forward to today, and that focus on user-centered design, which was supposed to be not looking at machines, looking at people, and focusing and prioritizing them through a user-centered design process, really that turned out actually to be not just user-centered design, but consumer-led design. So after 15, 20 years of user-centered design, you've got Amazon, which many people would say is helping create the climate catastrophe. And so I think a couple of years ago or more, I decided to sort of leave that, and I said, I'm no longer a user-centered designer, because focusing on people was becoming a big part of the problem. These fantastic systems that are built without even thinking of the consequences. You know, in the early days, it was move fast and break things, you know, build something. You know, Orville Wright didn't have a pilot's license, you know, so Facebooks of the world in the early days could build these things very quickly and it was almost generated by the values of let's do things quickly because the people we replaced through this disruption and innovation is going to be a good outcome. And of course, it hasn't been a good outcome. In some consequences, it's been a complete disaster. So the move now is to look at, increasingly people are using the term systemic design and systems design. If you're designing something, you think about the whole system, a bit like what Harry, I think, was pointing to. If you're going to design something, think not just about commerce, but how all of it, designing organizations, your products and services, that you look at the effect of the whole system in which they operate, people, society, and nature. And that obviously ties in with sort of B Corp trying to reform the sort of operating system of capitalism as well. But if there's designers listening, and particularly from a digital strand, that's what I'd like to say is, look, if you're sort of following the sort of tradition of user-centered design and user experience, I think we need to move to a methodology that includes outcomes and consequences of what you're designing during the design process. So that's one thing I wanted to share, particularly with the guys who are more of a digital and creative bent at the Triangle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on top of that, this is actually why beauty, which is a value not normally associated with business, is so important to us. I mean, if we truly want to build a vision for business that will motivate us rather than just be motivated by moral duty alone, we have to go further and think about what is beautiful, not solely what is right. And this is why kind of we want to see a larger role kind of being played kind of by the arts and business, because there you actually have some of the kind of key missing skills, especially visual, to do this kind of work. Just want to add that in.
Can I just jump in and ask a question there? Because I know sort of you talking there, James, about kind of that idea of kind of breaking things and disruption and that sort of thing. But I noticed there was a comment in the chat from Mark, and he was talking about that idea that, for some people who are in more traditional businesses, that it's a sense that you're kind of almost losing a little bit of ground if you start to invest in good business things, whether it's because you're spending more money on it, I guess, or more time on it, or that sort of thing. And it's something, that I've seen kind of comments around before, that sense that if all of your focus is not on kind of moving forward from a profitable point of view, then if you're losing ground to competitors who I guess are less bothered about that sort of thing, and how you kind of balance those risks of the things that made you a resilient and sustainable business, and then, how you change that and move that on without sort of jeopardizing what you've already created.
I think if I could jump on that one in, my response would be that ultimately you have a responsibility as a business, not just to critique yourself, but to critique your industry and critique those around you. And ultimately, whilst it may be a risk to take that step, the knock-on effect of you adopting something that ultimately impacts an industry-wide change is far more meaningful at the end of the day than kind of what would be your bottom line. And if you can influence that so an industry changes and there are economies of scale then behind this positive change, then ultimately that's something you can pin your hat to, and it will increase the reputation of yourself as an organization as well in the process. And that's something, as Patagonia, we tried to advocate through regenerative organic cotton, which is a form of farming that is actually positive. It sequesters carbon in the process of growing cotton rather than being done conventionally like most brands do, where it's pesticide heavy, there's no consideration of farmer welfare or even animal welfare. It then brings about a net positive that if it was to be adopted by a business much larger than ourselves, because ultimately we're small in the industry that we're part of, it would have a far greater effect that would be far more beneficial to the crisis that we're in than it would be if we kept it in-house, if we didn't do it in the first place. And I guess my response is very much motivated, not from a business perspective, and again, I can't speak as a small business owner, but ultimately from the impact in your sphere of influence that you should take consideration of when making these decisions.
Yeah, but even when you actually look at the data and kind of look at the benefits of becoming kind of a good business, I think it was Deloitte research that they did just last year actually showed that on average, purpose-led businesses kind of grow 3 times faster than their competition, and they have much higher levels of innovation, about 30% higher, and their employee retention is also kind of can't be competed with as well. So I actually think it is, I think Mark almost kind of implied that maybe education is needed, and I think that's true, because this illusion that kind of being good, being noble as a business and doing the right thing is actually kind of bad for your bottom line, when counterintuitively it's completely the opposite. It's an absolute fallacy that it's not good for business, and I think that's the word that we need to get out to communicate to people. You need to bring people in with the language that they understand, and if you say to them it's actually really good for your bottom line, then the ears will prick and they'll go, oh, okay, maybe tell me more about being purpose-led, and that's your way in. So sometimes, depending on if you're looking at more traditional services, who no matter how much you kind of talk, they just don't seem to be getting it, you need to communicate in their language, I think, and actually show them the data that backs it up, that there's a whole load of now.
I think the thing is, the data does show this, and the difficulty that we're working with clients is not necessarily working today. We need to think of horizon 2 or 3 years on from now, because whether we like it or not, doodah is hitting the fan. So and people get this, and people have heard that you have to pivot, because consumers and buyers already are wanting this, wanting to do business this way, and will be leaving or choosing with their money and walking with their feet. And therefore, what we are dealing with now is a wall of greenwash, and people that know commercially it's the right thing to look good, and lay yourselves with labels that prove the case. So authenticity and evidence is going to be really important, alongside character, because I was trying to, I don't want to tell the whole story. I bored Andrew to tears a couple of days ago with this, but I was trying to find some amla powder, right, to make my own sort of amla supplement capsules, because it tastes disgusting. And I was trying to find something. I went to the place that looked right. It had a stamp saying the Soil Association and organic, and I started to get concerned, because when I looked down their sort of reviews, they look false. I mean, even the bad one looks a bit false. Do you know what I mean? So I thought I'll call them and see what's going on. So they haven't called me back yet, interestingly enough. I won't say who it is, just in case. But I have a feeling that this is completely a branded front of a brand that is not authentic. And some of the comments saying, I've found hairs in this, what's going on, may not actually be a fake review. So it's going to be really, really hard to pick out, because everybody's going to go for this wall of marketing, and to pick out the really authentic companies that really mean it. It's not just evidence, it's character and personality. And we're trying to educate our clients that it's not just good enough to be sustainable. If you're sustainable and you can't communicate authentically to the market through your brand, people are not going to hear you. It is this mixture between evidence and authentication, or being authentic and communicating and being transparent. It's that magic system, because that is the only thing we know that's going to help people cut through. If you're not a well-known, authentic brand like Patagonia, if a startup wanted to grow or wanted to grow fast, that's the magic sort of process that we try to help people along.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the difference of perspective between ourselves and those startups. And I think one key component that could be added to that is transparency, and actually ensuring that when requests are made about your accreditations, when requests are made about your mix by way of staffing profiles, when your conversations are had, just generally that you are humble and that you are able to actually have complete transparency with whichever stakeholder it may be, because ultimately we're built by communities, and we're built within the communities that we build as businesses. And as soon as you start to isolate, you start to create problems. So that's all I have to add, really. But great points made.
Perfect, thank you. I hate to cut a good conversation short. I could continue this all night, but unfortunately, I've just got my eye on the clock. So thank you, everyone. That was really great. I'm just going to hand over now to Annalise from Pentameter, who's going to take us through about 40 minutes ish of a thought-provoking kind of session to for things to think about, tools and tips when you get started. So now that you're inspired, this will help you on the next bit.
We were planning about half an hour, but also leaving some time for questions and answers if we don't want to sort of bore people. Yeah, so it's going to be about half an hour, but there will be hopefully a chance and time at the end for questions.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Can everyone see my screen? Is that visible? Brilliant.
Yep.
Okay.
Got you.
Yep.
Thank you, kind of Andrew and Fiona, for and that was such a great discussion. I think we could have carried on for hours, but I think that would have been very antisocial for the attendees. And so, so kind of obviously we've said a little bit about kind of Pentameter already. Kind of we are that kind of transformation design company, really trying to accelerate change because we do think change at speed is possible, and that it can be fun, it can be creative, and it can also be a great source of learning and meaning when you take the right approach. Next. So when we kind of work with companies, we usually focus and kind of help them to align their purpose, culture, and impact. And we do this by drawing on kind of a load of expertise, such as engagement, design, sustainability, communications, and B Corp, because we really think a systemic, holistic approach to change is the best one, and it's going to be the most successful. And that is also by making sure that your unique purpose and authenticity is expressed and lived out through your people and your brand. And this is why we became so passionate about B Corp, becoming a B Corp ourselves. We'll be trained B leaders and consultants. I am also kind of an ambassador and kind of chair one of the local kind of Be Local communities, and I believe my co-chair is also attending this call, so kind of shout out to Donald. So first of all, before we kind of get into detail, we thought it might be kind of interesting to actually just scope the room, see how much you know about B Corp already. So we'd like to launch a poll. So if James, my beautiful assistant, yeah, he's got it up on screen. Okay. Brilliant, thank you. So what we want to know is what your present knowledge of B Corp is. Is it kind of, you know, a little, you understand the basics, you've already started the BIA and started that journey, or are you an expert already on the subject?
Still voting. I can't vote. No little. Okay, I think that's it. So I'm going to press end of poll, and I'm going to share the results. Can you see?
Yep, we can. Thank you. Yeah, we can. Thank you, James. So yes, we've got a mix, but predominantly kind of it's people who understand the basics but are here to find out more, which, yeah, that's good. I think usually to be expected when you're putting on a bit of a B Corp 101, you only get a couple of the experts kind of coming in to join, so that's great. Let's close. Okay, so we probably could have talked this point to death in the discussion kind of already, but this idea that kind of the data really is there, kind of it is good for business to be a good business, and this fallacy that kind of with the effort that you're going to have to go through, that's required really to go through that process to become a B Corp, Many people expect that it's going to create friction on the business, but actually it does positively affect the bottom line instead. So this is just kind of showing how kind of B Corps are providing much faster growth and high levels of employee retention as well. And what this is showing is that you can have purpose and profit. They are not mutually exclusive. And not just that, but increasingly purpose is driving profit. And this is as consumers get on board for that need to change. And the best way to enact your purpose in the world is to turn it into a vision. Visions are very effective at drawing people in and helping them to change, particularly when everyone gets to participate designing that vision. But what kind of vision is needed? Well, I would suggest one that responds to the natural human desire to flourish, that kind of incorporates sustainability, but also goes beyond it and really looks at flourishing, because that creates meaning and a sense of purpose, and that provides hope. It still acknowledges our challenges, yet enabling us to build capabilities and grow. But it has to be open to telling and retelling, so that each of us can make it our own and kind of find our place within that. But what is wholly underplayed in the possibility of attaining such a vision is the role that business has to play. And this is why we found so much in common with the B Corp movement, because B Corp believes that although capitalism has done a lot of good, such as bringing many people out of poverty, it has also come at a great cost due to the system being broken by valuing a select few over the broader collective. And they, like us, believe that business does have that role to play in being a force for good in the world. But what's the shift going on here? Fundamentally, B Corp is a major shift from a shareholder model of capitalism to a stakeholder model. And as we can see, we are not meeting the necessary and just targets of human needs, and we are completely overreaching and overstretching our consumption of the planet and natural resources. And this move is not about diminishing value of shareholders, but raising the value of people and planet up to meet it on that level. Because people are demanding more, and they're demanding proof. They're also looking beyond label certifications, a bit like the anecdote that James shared. And instead, they're wanting to buy from, work for, or invest in values-driven companies. So when we talk about green business, sustainable business, or even conscious capitalism, we need to get behind the stories and find the facts. Are these just hyperbolic marketing statements, or are they true? Are these companies being genuinely authentic by practicing what they say they do? And is the CSR program integral to the value of the company and not just a first aid plaster to ease some bad press? Because real long-term trust and loyalty comes from evidence, which in the case of B Corp is kind of the standards and metrics that it provides. So there are three key principles that underpin being a B Corp. These are firstly kind of the social and environmental performance. And there is actually a bar that needs to be met of 80 points, below which you're not able to certify. And it's not always kind of the easiest when you're going through and you suddenly realize that something is 0.02 of a point. Secondly, you have transparency about your progress, because people have a right to know and access the information about who they work for and what they're consuming. And lastly is accountability, which Harry was talking about earlier on. We have to be able to say that we recognize that we must consider all stakeholders when we make business decisions, not just shareholders. And we need to commit to this by changing kind of articles of association at Companies House. So that's one of the requirements of B Corp. Okay, so now I'll quickly share just some of the key numbers that give perspective to the scale of this movement. So at the moment, globally, there are over 3,600 certified B Corps, and this is over 75 countries and across about 150 industries. And surprisingly, despite the turmoil of 2020, the UK community reached over 500 B Corps and became one of the fastest growing B Corp communities in the world, with a growth rate of 116%. I think the numbers kind of literally doubled in the space of a year and a half, even though it's been around in the UK since about 2016, I think 2014 or 2016. And Fortune magazine recognized quite early on that B Corp also can act as a checklist that your organization can use. It's the approach that we took. Kind of as a startup, we decided to use it as a blueprint for setting up our operations, because it is a powerful management tool. Now, before I pass you over to James to take you through the BIA, we'd like to do another poll to find out what's important to you. So again, if my lovely assistant.
So this is a multiple choice. So for this, it's slightly different. You can choose three. You've got 3 voting rights. Okay, so this is a list of benefits, and we want you to choose 3 things that are the most important to you. This is a bit of homework, this, isn't it? So it's considered, obviously, when if you're considering B Corp.
I've dished this question out a lot, never actually had to answer it myself.
Still voting? Okay, no, still going. I think that's voted. Everybody done? Okay. Oh, no, still going, changing their minds. Hold on a minute.
Too many wonderful choices, really,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think it stopped moving, yeah. And people panicked at the last minute and started changing some. Okay, so that's it. I'm ending the poll now, okay? And share results. Can you see them?
Yep. Wow, that's interesting. So with a landslide is improved sustainability. And then what do we have next? Then we have competing second place for protecting company's mission and also reinforcing your strong company culture. So yeah, no, that's really great to hear as well. And nice, we've got a very noble crowd, because no one said that it was to generate press coverage. So we've got a very altruistic crowd here, so always lovely to see. So let's kind of close that. And then next up, I think I'll be passing over to James. James, are you here? Brilliant.
Can you see my wonderful B impact assessment graphic?
We can indeed, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so has to be, because I just want to take people, if people are thinking about B Corp, that's a lot of the philosophy and the non-technical stuff, really. So I thought we couldn't do really a B Corp 101 without just giving you a very quick overview of the B impact assessment, which is the tool that we use, an online tool to sort of holistically, or you can holistically assess your business. B Corp is a community of business, or as we've said, of businesses wanting to do things differently. But the BIA is a community and management tool that helps you do that. And the important thing is it does that. You can do that whether or not you want to certify as a B Corporation. Many more people use this tool than and maybe much later down the line or never. I don't know what the figures. It's like 8 times more companies are using this as an assessment tool.
It used to be that only about 12 to 16% would actually certify out of the users.
Yeah. So it's a widely used tool because it's awesome, I have to say. There's not a tool like this that really looks at soft and hard metrics and the whole sort of, I overuse the word holistic, but the whole system of your business, and allows you to assess it yourself, and also have that evidence, if you so wish, to be authenticated by an external objective methodology and organization. So it's the BIA, again, is the B impact assessment. It's a holistic tool to measure your business against a wide range of sustainability business metrics. And these are so what does it measure? Well, it measures these things. These are the sections or the pillars of the BIA. There's governance, how your organization is run and organized, your workers, the environment, community, and customers. And all of these things are quite detailed. Some people can find it overwhelming because they are quite detailed, the questions that you go into. But it's also important to remember that as you go through this, it's a fantastic learning tool, which we'll go on to in a little while. And because of this, really, it's becoming increasingly seen as the gold standard for measuring a business social and environmental impact. So if you're going to do this, you need to understand, and I'm going to try and give you, I hope it's not going to technical, but people are thinking of doing this. This is really helpful. We've tried to prioritize the information without taking you through a 3-hour sort of workshop to do this. So if you wanted to have a go yourself and sign into the BIA, I think people have been asked if you could you actually get an account and go in? And if you have, we're assuming you've done that, and therefore we're sort of giving you sort of tips that may help you go and just speed up your experience and your engagement with the system. So first thing to understand is, apart from the fact it's in sections dealing with different parts of your organization or different angles, there are 2 types of questions. Ones that deal with operational impact, and here you have the technical day-to-day running of your business. So this is your footprint. Do you have childcare options? Your greenhouse emissions? What are your facilities? Let's look at your supply chain. How are you governed? How do you treat your workers? These are things that pretty much are generic for most businesses, not all, but we tend to find out these are generic for most businesses. And I don't know if they say this, but there's this feeling that you need 80 points to get over the threshold to become certified. And I think we feel that the verifiers, the B Corp, try to get you to over 80 points on operational impact alone, or at least they like you to have a go at trying to get to 80 points on your operational impact. They're generic for most businesses. The good thing is they build in existing standards. So if you've got, say, ISO 14001, 4001, and you've already got that accreditation, it will take that and use that, and you get points for it. And if you've got an EMS system, you will be credited for that, how that works for you. And more recently, just over the last couple of years, in fact, I think it was launched last year, there was a lot of discussion in the B Corp community and a lot of demand saying that we also work with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And it feels like we've got 2 sets of objectives here. How could these sort of merge? So over the last few years, the SDGs, the United Nations and B Corp have been working together, and it is now brilliant that they're now integrated. So as you go through answering the questions, there is a part of it where you can say, how does this fit with your work with the SDGs? And also it reminds you as you're going, if there's any signs of improvement or targets, it refers to them, so you know how they fit together and dovetail together, which is fantastic how that works. So the second set of questions is what we call the impact business models. Now, this is all about you and your business, and these assess the value, not uniquely, but it's close to the unique value, if you like, or the value your business brings to the world. What, as a business, as a consumer purpose-led business, are you intentionally trying to do as a business to have a positive impact? Okay, and that, of course, is a bit woollier. So you asked about what you're trying to do, and the questions here are about the benefits and the evidence you have. So, you know, you have to really, because it's so evidence-based, they are really strong on, if you're having a vision and you're trying to do something, that you evidence that that's what, you know, we had I'll give you an example how this worked. We had an example that when we want to mission lock our company in its giving, so we gave so much away, our chosen charity was for giving female hygiene products to homeless people. And we did this the quickest way because we thought it would work for the BIA. So we went off and bought some stuff, and Annalise went round to what they have a pink bin around Manchester, and you basically donate it in there. We took a photograph, showed them the receipt, and we thought that was the clearest evidence we can give for doing something and with a positive impact. But that piece of evidence was actually initially rejected because we had to show with proper research how doing something like that would actually help, rather than us thinking it was a great idea to do. So we had to do some actually academic work and look at leaders in the field, talk to them to get the real evidence to back up our claim that that was actually helping, rather than us just thinking it was a nice thing to do. So it's really good, sort of, you could say that as that, well, crikey, that's tough. But on the other hand, we learned so much by doing that and developed so much by doing that piece of research as part of our verification. So because there's so many different businesses, these questions, the impact business model questions, tend to be what we call gateway questions, that when you answer them, they then open up a whole load of other questions. Otherwise, the BIA would be massively unwieldy. It's dealing with all industries across all sectors. So you will come across in the impact business model questions that when you need to be careful when you answer them, because if you, and you know, just double check if you're answering some of these key questions, and it will tell you, look, if you answer this positively, it's going to open up a whole load of questions for you. Make sure that you think that through before you press the button, it will then open it will sort of send you down a rabbit hole to a whole load of other questions. So so just be careful of that. But this is where the real magic of the system and the uniqueness of the BIA is it works with you as a business and what you're trying to do. And it's not like, it feels like sometimes, like certainly with it, when you're filling in your operational stuff, you know, you fill in your tax return, you know, you're trying to give receipts to back up something. But when it comes to the impact model, you got to understand there are people at B Lab behind this that are really real people assessing what you're doing and want to you know, want to assess the best of you, but they also need to see the sort of color of the whites of your eyes to know, and that's the phone call later on in the process. You get a call where you talk this through, and it's a dialogue, particularly in the impact section when you're answering that. But again, that's great and really useful as a business to help you strengthen your impact and understand what you're doing on your development journey. So so the other thing I want to mention here before we go on is that if you have a go at this, we tend to find people are in two camps. We have rescued quite a few people that have gone through the B impact assessment on their own and basically had to pick them off the floor in tears because they think they're pretty good and ethical, and that the line to get over is 80 points, and they've come out with sort of 26 points. And so we tend to split them into groups of sort of humble pessimists and visionary the visionaries that tend to sort of optimists that think, oh, we're doing that, oh yes, we can do that, oh, we can do that. So when you go through it, you'll either get a higher than normal. Our practice, people pretty much fit into these two categories. They mark themselves down because they've heard you have to mark something with evidence, or the other ones that think, oh yeah, we're really good guys, we can get all these points. So a lot of the times when we go in, to help people, we give them what's called a baseline impact. So we sort of check their workings, and we either raise them, hopefully, if they're on the ground, and so look, it's not bad, you can find points here, or just bring them down to earth. So when you do it, please try to not give yourself points for things that you are hoping or aspire to change. Start with giving yourself a really strong, only give yourself points for those things that you really have evidence for and are really doing and have evidence for. And if you want to improve, then just mark it. I'll show you in a minute where you mark yourself on the scorecard, so you can come back and remember where you've got to, because it can get lost as you go through it. You need those sort of bookmarks and tools to remember where you got to and your responses. So here's an example question. This is note the color. So one part of this the system here is that which section it is, because it's wonderfully color coded. This is the governance section, which is in orange, and the question here is the impact reporting on, I think it's in the transparency section of governments, okay? And it shows you here that you are again escalating power or options of things you can do. As you go down, you'll see there's more and more to do to get that. And if you see here in the top right hand corner, you see a star and a bookmark. So if there's something that you're not sure of, you want to come back to, bookmark and come and say, I need to go back and answer that later. If you think it's something that you need to improve, then click the star, and you'll see in your reports, because it's quite complex as you go through, there's ways of finding out and reporting on all of the things you've starred, or all the things that you've bookmarked later on from the on your dashboard. So yes, these are graded to help development improve. And if you can read those, I'll read them out if you can't, but I'm assuming you can read them. They start from nothing, and they end up with sort of like an exemplar high marks option for being really good at this sharing information publicly. And so therefore you could see these questions and these links as like a kind of a roadmap for you. So one of the amazing values you've got in using this system is it does give you these multiple choice structures that allows you to see what you're currently doing and what you could be doing, which is obviously a very, very powerful learning tool. And that's why it's so popular with companies that don't necessarily want to be a B Corp. They can go into this and go into a section and see how well they're doing and what they could do as options to develop the company to be more sustainable and equitable. And here's just another quick one. This is the worker section in blue, again, following an escalating path of options. Now these change, so the BIA is constantly improving itself. This is version 6 we're on now, and we're really pleased. We actually held back a bit for when version 6 came out, because we wanted to, it involved a lot in the upgrade with concerning company culture and engagement, which was great. The usability of the BIA is improved in version 6, and the language still a bit American, but it's much more international language. People are complaining that they couldn't understand it because it was all in sort of American speak. But it's much better now and is improving all the time. So as I said, the first run through, you really need to try to be as realistic as possible without being one of the humble pessimists. So I think now, having just shown you that, I've shown you still slides, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you just for a few moments, just so you can get orientation. I'm going to go live on RB impact assessment, so you can, let me just get rid of this. So you can see the dashboard and just point out some things to you that you might find useful. So I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to stretch my screen. Oops, it is a. Just sign myself out. Can you just hold on a bit while I sign in? Oh, a minute.
Yeah, and I'll just say, whilst you do that, I'll just say that, just as a kind of disclaimer, that obviously this is a BIA kind of system that of a company that's already been certified. So kind of there will be kind of slight differences between this and what you'll kind of be seeing when you're onboarding.
It's under these situations you tend to follow your forget your password, don't you? But luckily I haven't. So there you go. Now keep away from the tabs. Okay, and I'm going to try and spread my screen out so you can see it without clicking the back button. How's that going? Annalise, is that all right?
Yeah, that looks
okay,
good.
so this is the dashboard. And you won't see this because we've already certified, but this bit you will get at the top notes and instructions from B-Lab. So as you're going through it, they'll often send you notifications and talk to you a bit like email here in this space, okay? As you drop down, here you go on the right-hand side, this is the SDG Action Manager, so you can learn more, and it tells you how the SDG system works with B Corp. That's an interesting read, but you'll see them pop up on the questions anyway. And this is the view. So we view our BIA, and here you see all the sections: community, government, environment, etc. And as you view, can't go in now, but you can carry on seeing the questions as you click through. You'll see a whole list of questions. It will take you through quite, it's really good usability on this, and it's sort of gamified as well, because you're desperately trying to get a points up on your questions. So the usability of the site and how it takes you through the questions and guides you through the questions is really helpful. So should I go into anything, Annalise, or do I?
Yeah, I would say just click into community or community. Yeah. I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's a summary of one of the question sections. So you see all these. You go in and see the questions, all in different subsections of those headings. And as you see, we've marked this as a bookmark to go back to, or a start to modify the goal and to go back and room for improvement. If you want to download it, you can download this out and print it out. So you've got a sort of usable document or a digital document if you want to put it out in digital form. But when you go through, before you start, get your head around the stars and the bookmarks, because once you go back, it's difficult to jump back again. So just going back. Okay, just some couple of other things you might miss, right? One is, if you go into reports here, you've got lots of different reports. And this improvement report is really important because it reports on all the things you've noted in your stars and your bookmarks that you want to improve. So that's our dirty laundry, what we need to improve on. There's quite a lot. And obviously this is a tool to continuously improve. Just because you're certified doesn't mean you're not on a journey for improvement. And the other thing another thing you probably want to know is this is powerful as well. So again, I'm showing you these things because these are things that we got quite a long way in and thought, why didn't we find this earlier? This is another one, the question filter. Okay, the filters where you can literally filter. I need to go back to the.
No, if you go on question filter, and then it should be to the top right hand side filter just above.
Yeah, sorry,
there we go.
Yeah. So all of the different, think of this as a really super duper database filter for anybody who uses databases. You've got everything you can possibly imagine here to filter your data, your impact areas, the kind of points you've got on attributes. You choose it, it's there for you. In fact, it's almost overkill, some of this. If you want to filter something to manage the chaos of all the answers you've got, definitely learn to use that. It's a fantastic tool. I think they've really gone to town on that recently because people were finding it difficult to cope with the complexity. So I think that's just about it. Anything else you think I should take them around, Annalise?
No, I think that was everything.
This is your B Corp certification. This click shows you where you are in the process. Yeah, those are the key things we wanted to show you. I hope that's helpful. Obviously, we can't be with you in your room as you're doing each one, but those are the sort of things that we wanted to show you that we couldn't really do on slides. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
So kind of we do have
Okay,
just
back to you,
a couple
Annalise.
more. Yeah, we do have a couple more slides just on benefits, but we also know we've kind of covered quite a lot of that already. So very aware of time. So kind of happy for you, Andrew, to kind of take the helm again if you prefer.
Well, no, I mean, I just there was a question that came in, and I was just conscious of having time to answer that about CICs and B Corp.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a Baltic Creative itself is a community interest company, and actually Liverpool has an awful lot of community interest companies. Can they go on the process to being certified as a B Corp?
Yeah, we do get this question a lot. We're a CIC, or we want to be a CIC in a B Corp. Is that possible? So long story is it's dead easy because they map, but the BIA is it's quite a bit more rigorous than the demands for CIC. So if you can get through the B Corp assessment, and as Annalise will say, you're prepared to change your articles of association to be to a stakeholder model from a shareholder model. There is nothing. In fact, we literally copied and pasted. I think the last company we worked with said, we want to change our articles of association, but there is also a stipulation in our articles that CIC require. There is nothing in the CIC requirements that isn't in the BIA requirements for your articles. So pretty much that's what we advise people to do. Go for BIA, but keep monitoring. But once you've done your BIA, it's pretty much a straightforward step to copy and paste some of the text to fill in the CIC, because it's a less rigorous requirement. Is that right, Annalise?
Yeah, no, that's completely right. So therefore, if you're a CIC already, kind of there's obviously nothing you need to do about a CIC application. You can just go straight for B Corp. It's fine. So what James was explaining is if you kind of aren't yet a CIC and you just want to make sure that B Corp and CIC, there aren't any barriers kind of between them. So yeah, but it's fine.
And we've just had another question come in the Q&A section. How many hours would it take to go through the BIA first time? And can you confirm that it's free?
Well, okay, firstly, yes, the BIA tool is kind of free. It's a really powerful management tool. So kind of B Lab make sure that it's basically open source like access, because they want to help kind of get as much change as possible in society. It would be against the whole kind of ethos of the movement, kind of if they actually hid it all behind a paywall. So that's great. So in terms of the time it takes to go through the BIA, I think even just an anecdote, I think, James, wasn't it right when we started BIA, we
This is
got
why we're
told,
laughing. Sorry for the person who asked the question. We're not laughing at you. We're laughing at the... We
got told it would take about 4 hours, and we stupidly started it at I think it was like 2 or 3 p.m. on a Friday, and it wasn't. So it depends on the approach. So kind of obviously you can do like a super I say super attempting quick kind of wipe through, where if you don't know the answer, you literally just kind of bookmark it and you just move on. That's kind of one way, but that's not going to help you get a real baseline score. If you want a real genuine baseline score to know where your starting point is, where you need to go, kind of, you need to get into the thick of it, really. So kind of, I mean, for us, with our clients, we tend to actually, they're quite intense sessions, so we tend to break them up into kind of almost sessions based around each section of the BIA almost, and we make sure that we have the key kind of the key people in the room who have access to that kind of information. So if you're looking at the workers section, you need to make sure you have your head of people, head of HR, kind of people who have access to that, the data or kind of or knowledge quickly. So the more you prep in that kind of way, having the right people in the room, like the easier it's going to be. But it is
yeah. So if you so the answer to it's as quick as you want it to be. If you want to race through it to get a feel of it and bookmark things you don't know, which will bookmark a lot probably, yeah, definitely a few hours. If you want to take it slower, then make sure you've got everybody in the room, give yourselves more time. So just to say, it is free. You don't have to do anything until you step into action for actually certification. It is free, and even though Pentameter are talking to you about paid service, and we go and help people, we often have projects where they haven't got resources and we have to go in and help them. But we are also B leaders in the area. We are, if it's just a simple advice or a telephone call, that is free as well. So please don't hesitate to contact one of us if you want general advice and things like that. The BIA is free. That's what's amazing about it. And so the general advice on how to get going is also free. So please don't hesitate to reach out at all. We'd be very pleased to support you in any way we can. Perfect.
Thank you both. That was great. Well, yeah, that's us at time. I'm going to hand over to Alison to say the final word. But before I do, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and spending an hour and a half of your time with us tonight. And a big thank you to James, Annalise, Harry and Cornell for your time tonight and sharing your stories. That was really great. It's great and really valuable, and yeah, we're really grateful. To everyone who's tuned in, over the next couple of days, I'll send an email out with the recording for this so you can watch it back again. I'll also put links in for everyone who came tonight to share their story, so you can read more about the amazing work they do. And we'd like you to stay in touch. If you've been inspired or you're on a journey and you're starting out, or you've got something, you feel compelled beyond this to take impact in an area, tell us about it. Let us know what you're doing, and if you need any support or help, we'll be here and can connect you to people that can support. So thank you all, and I will hand over to our partners, Baltic Creative.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And yeah, I think we second the thanks of everybody who's joined us, all the tenants and attendees, and also to all the speakers. It's such an interesting and important topic for us to cover. And I think, again, all the information that was been shared will be incredibly useful to some of our businesses. We've obviously got a variety of small businesses to larger scale businesses. And that key thing that sort of come out of this for me is that in terms of your growth journey, the sooner you start looking into this, the better. So we'll obviously share a lot of the information that you've given us. Mark, my managing director, has already said that we're going to look into the BIA. I have a quick question on that, and it does actually ask you for examples sometimes. Is it worth you having links and things like that to include within the BIA, or does it? Have I got that wrong? Sorry.
What do you mean by examples? It's asking you for evidence.
Yeah, evidence at the bottom.
Yeah, it's evidence. Yeah, okay. So it's just asking for evidence. Okay, you're saying this is true. You need to, if it's buying something, show a receipt. Right. Anything that will show it's actually real. It's just literally evidence they're after. It can be a photograph of what's in your fridge. We know, the Bruti, when they did, I remember them saying, look, what do I do? go and photograph the inside of our fridge? Yeah, that'll do. So, you know, it could be anything. It's the
I
evidence
think
they're
we
after.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, we even got to a silly point where it's photographs of us pointing at kind of boxes for battery collection and kind of just a point.
Yeah, that was I just wanted to check on that and just double check, but I think it's given us a bit of food for thought at Baltic Creative in terms of sort of the culture of how we engage businesses with the ideas of sort of sustainability and culture and sort of diversity. And, you know, we offer some of our tenants, you know, compulsory fire safety training and compulsory first aid training, but why are we not offering them compulsory sort of diversity and inclusivity training and sustainability training as an organisation, and trying to push that a little bit more? So there's a few ways that we can sort of think about how we sort of challenge what we're doing already and push forward, and a few easy wins, but of course it's not always an easy win, and we've got to, you know, invest our time and our energy into that. So again, sorry, I don't want to waffle, but thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting, and I'm interested to see what our journey sort of takes on for us as an organisation and how we can support our businesses. So yeah.